Good evening. Notice is hereby given that in accordance with the Open Public Meetings Act, Chapter 231, the laws 1975, notice that this meeting has been sent to all school offices, officially designated newspapers, filed with the township clerk, and posted in the Board of Education office 48 hours in advance of this meeting. Roll call, please, Mrs. Ablito.
Certainly. Mrs. Pintorelli?
Here.
Mr. Puccio? Mr. Rossini?
Here.
Mrs. Rothenberg?
Here.
Mr. Schlereth?
Here.
Mrs. Sanande?
Here.
And Mrs. Waldes?
Here. Please stand for the flag salute. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Good evening. Thank you for attending this evening. I hope you all had a restful and enjoyable spring break. We're very happy this evening to open this board meeting and present it as an opportunity for the public to ask questions before the April 20th election. I will now turn this over to Dr. Frank Alvarez, who will tell you more about tonight's program. Thank you.
Thank you and good evening. Welcome to our virtual referendum forum, all about the River Vale School District's bond proposal. Tonight, you will hear from the financial experts and architects who have been working on this referendum for 2 years. Our panel also includes principals, teachers, and counselors who know the most about our schools and our students' needs. We hope you ask them questions and learn more about our proposal to improve the River Vale schools. Kelly Ippolito, our school business administrator, will now explain how you can ask questions of our panelists.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Good evening. We're going to follow the same format for questions that we do at the board meetings. If you would like to ask a question, please type your name and your address in the chat. We will encourage you to type your question as well. We ask that you only use the chat function for this purpose. Your question should be related to the topic that is being discussed. Also, please make sure your name appears correctly on your device so that I can find you. If you type your name in the chat, we'll look for the matching name to call on you, bring you before the board so you can ask your question. If you prefer to ask a question without joining the forum, please email rivervalevotes@rivervaleschools.com. We will direct those questions to our panelists. The schedule for this forum was designed to cover as many topics as possible. If we have to move on to the next segment before taking all questions, attendees are welcome to stay on until the end of the forum to ask their questions at that time. If we do not get to all of the emailed questions during tonight's forum, we will continue to answer them after the event.
Oh, one person here from the public.
After several delays during the pandemic, the special election to decide the bond referendum is coming up quickly. Polls will open for in-person voting on Tuesday, April 20th. Residents who would rather vote by mail still have a few days before the application deadline. An approved referendum is the only way to receive state aid that would reduce the $35.7 million bond proposal by nearly 30%. That's significant. The River Vale District's needs are too large to be covered through the regular operating budget. We identified these repairs and renovations before the pandemic. The needs are not going away. We have been sharing information about the bond referendum in many ways. You might have seen a news article or a social media post. You might have seen the many signs, lawn signs around town that are cropping up. Our media website is the most complete resource on the River Vale bond referendum. You will find charts, a video, and frequently asked questions to help you learn more about our proposal. Our first panelists have analyzed our buildings and proposed projects that would improve the student experience. You will now hear from our architects at Land Associates and the construction oversight team at Epic Management. I will turn it over to Steve Sikora of Land Associates.
Sorry, I was muted. Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Matt, if you could take over the screen and put our slideshow up. We want to go over, for those of you that have seen the presentation, just a refresher on what the projects will be as part of the referendum. But for those of you joining us for the first time, we want to go through and explain the projects that we are considering. Next slide, please. So how did we get to this point? The process started 2 years ago in 2019 when Land was commissioned to do a facilities assessment report of all the buildings in the school district, the 4 buildings. After the assessment report was completed, we met with the school district administration, the facilities committee, to review the report and develop recommendations for projects to be completed. After that was completed, at the end of 2019 and early 2020, we met with the administration and the staff at each of the schools to identify district needs from a usage standpoint and to prioritize the projects. Next slide, please. First, we're going to go over the projects being slated for the Roberge Elementary School. Next slide. We're looking at capital improvement projects that include roof replacement, rooftop HVAC equipment, classroom casework upgrades, flooring, ceilings, and lighting improvements throughout the building, new LED lighting, indoor door replacement, masonry upgrades, gym clear-story window replacement, expansion of the nurse's bathroom, upgrading classroom bathrooms, upgrading all the electrical panels, and air conditioning. And there's some photos here. You can see the roofing on the top 2 photos. The roofing materials is wearing. It's reaching the end of its useful life, and we need to invest in providing new roofs in order to have a watertight facility. The lower left, we can see there's a tremendous amount of storage that's located throughout the classrooms. We can see the old flooring in the classrooms. These would be upgraded as part of the question 1 referendum. And on the lower right, we can see some rooftop HVAC equipment. Again, many of this equipment was installed over 20 years ago and has reached or is nearing the end of its useful life and needs to be replaced. Next slide, please. Next, we'll talk about the Woodside Elementary School. If you can go to the next slide. The theme here on the projects is very similar since the age of the roofs and rooftop equipment is similar actually at all 3 buildings in the school district. So there's roof replacement, rooftop HVAC upgrades, classroom improvements, masonry upgrades, air conditioning, etc. And you can see the roofing photos in the upper 2 photos, HVAC equipment on the roof on the lower left, and flooring improvements on the lower right, and general classroom conditions in the center photo. You can see in this photo that there is no ceiling in the classroom, it's just the exposed roof deck. And we're looking to install new ceilings throughout these areas and other older sections of the school. Next slide, please. Next, I'll discuss the Holdrum Middle School projects. Next slide, please. At the Holdrum School, again, we're looking at roofing and HVAC replacement, classroom casework upgrades, an upgraded domestic hot water piping, replacement of floor and ceilings, and new LED lighting and upgrade of all the electrical panels and air conditioning. And again, you can see how the roofing in the top two photos is nearing the end of its useful life. The surface granulars have worn off. The top surfacing material is cracking. We are just about at the end of the useful life of the roof system. In the lower left, you can see older rooftop HVAC equipment, again, at or beyond its useful life, and it needs to be replaced. In the center photo, you can see there's lockers in the classrooms, and we're going to talk about moving the lockers out at the Holdrum School into a new location. You can also see that the older classrooms don't have any ceilings at the top there. It's just the exposed roof deck. As you can see, roofing is a big part of the first question referendum. It makes up about $8 million worth of that first question. And also rooftop HVAC equipment replacement is a big component of the first question, and that's about $6 million worth of work. Next slide, please. Matt Fink, can you join on and discuss this photo?
So while many of the projects are behind the scenes, keeping the building operational and up to current standards, we want to make sure that the educational environment followed suit. We want to make sure that we're providing opportunities for 21st century learning and for creating classrooms that will enhance not just the appearance, but the overall experience. So as Steve mentioned, we'll be looking at new lighting opportunities, new ceilings, new flooring, and ways we can provide new ways to create storage within the space, updating existing casework, and also the overall furniture for these new looks, new feels for the overall educational environment. Next slide. Again, we'll be looking at this from a variety of levels. Here you'll see a quick glimpse of the middle school, how we can provide new opportunities once the lockers have been removed from the general space. It provides new storage opportunities, new opportunities for writable space, so people can gather in a variety of areas, and creating more modern, more flexible environments throughout the district. Next slide.
Matt Wolf, if you can speak on the canopy design.
All right, I'm going to walk us through a few slides on a few different new canopies that we're proposing at each of the three schools. This represents a small portion of the referendum budget. And the goal with providing new canopies is threefold. One, to enhance the identity and sense of arrival at each school, to provide new signage at each school, and also to provide enhanced shelter and lighting. So I'm going to walk you through first starting at Holdrum. You can see the existing conditions here. It's very difficult to identify where the front office is if you're a first-time visitor. Even with the signage here in the shadows of the door, it's still not obvious. The next slide is our proposed canopy design, creating a much more substantial canopy with new signage above, main office signage as well, much more prominent and easy to identify the main entrance. And then we're also proposing smaller canopies at the two smaller entrances near the cafeteria on the left. Moving on to Roberge, you can see also we have a very modest existing canopy at this school. You see the signage of the building is to the right on the two-story volume, but the entrance is very modest and it's tucked in the corner, and the canopy is very limited. So we looked at enhancing the size and the scale of that canopy as well. Here you can see a much larger canopy. It has a soft arch metal roof on it. We relocated the signage to the front of the canopies and created a new, much more architectural canopy that has much more presence and helps with the identification of the school. Looking at Woodside, similar condition as Roberge, where we have a single-story portion of the school on the left and the two-story portion of the school on the right, the canopies tucked in the center. We looked to bring the same vocabulary and architectural materials to this school as well that we just saw in Roberge. You can see a similar designed canopy with a soft arched metal roof with a metal framed structure, and also the signage of the school on the face of the canopy. Again, enhancing the footprint of the sheltered area. And there'd be new lighting underneath here, as well as the new signage. And here's a composition of all three canopies. You can see some common vocabulary between them as far as the metals, the colors, the new signage. I think this will be a really nice enhancement, not only for signage reasons, but also functional reasons for more covered drop-off and waiting areas, as well as really celebrating and creating a sense of arrival at each of the three schools. Next, Matt Fink is going to talk about the wellness centers at the Holdrum and other schools as well.
Thank you, Matt. Aligning with the goals of the district, we want to bring wellness into both education and the architecture. As we study the different schools, we want to create different opportunities throughout the proposed corridors, throughout the wellness center, and some of the new experiences coming in between each of the different wings. Here are a variety of design inspiration, starting with small breakout areas, whether it be within corridors or other gathering places, for students to either reflect on studies, meet with other people, or even express various ideas. At the same time, we're identifying wellness centers throughout all three schools, which we'll discuss later on, to provide spaces for, again, reflection, for collaboration, to enhance both the mind and the body at the same time, and provide new environments to stimulate overall well-being and growth. And then finally, we're also examining living learning gardens, how there's a great correlation between nature and educational studies, that by changing the atmosphere, by changing the environment, or even just the activities, there's improved benefit for everyone experiencing those spaces. Next slide, please. Here you'll see a zoomed out view of Holdrum Middle School, where we really got to take the opportunity to examine the entire school and find ways to improve the overall design, starting from the classrooms all the way to general circulation. As we stated before, we'd be moving the lockers out of the individual classrooms, clearing up important floor space in each of those classrooms for storage or other educational needs. And we've proposed a new connecting corridor off the back side to finally join the different wings and relieve all those cluster points, areas of congestion throughout the morning, throughout the day, so students can easily grab a book, go to their next class without traversing from one side up and down the school and interfering with other paths of travel. In doing this, we were able to provide a few other additions that will greatly benefit the entire school itself. Starting on the left side, as part of this corridor addition, we were able to provide a new classroom for the expanding student population, opportunities for SGI additions for small group instruction, so students can get individual or small group attention. And then you'll see on the far right side, the proposed wellness center. Again, we'll dive into this later, but by creating these different corridors, we're able to provide new opportunities for these living learning gardens. That these would be great spaces for students and teachers to escape, or to provide new formats for lessons, whether it be science, art, literature. There would be a variety of new features to really create something fantastic for the overall Rivervale School District. Next slide, please. We've also taken these wellness centers and tried to incorporate them into each one of the elementary schools. Here in Roberge, you'll see that we've placed a smaller wellness center right off the media center with connection to its own courtyard so students of every age can have that opportunity to focus on overall well-being and for these very flexible learning environments for something truly unique. Next slide. Again, trying to bring in those same ideas, this openness to the outside to bring light, air, nature into the room, and also a large environment for whether it be some exercise or yoga spaces or areas to retreat and to recollect before joining the larger group or the rest of the class. Next slide. The same at Woodside, utilizing the space by the main office and also providing a small area to the right of that. We are creating an additional wellness center with another living learning garden off the back side. Matt, can you please go to the next slide? Here we were able to figure things a little bit easier. So a new guidance office can be provided closer to the main office, creating more of a wellness suite and rounding out the main entrance. So all these important features are right at the main entry versus elsewhere in the school. Next slide. Thank you.
Okay. I would like to ask Bill Morris of Epic Management, one of the panelists, if he could just discuss his role in the referendum projects.
Thanks, Steve. Yeah, we become the the eyes and ears watchdog, if you will, not only of the project, but on behalf of the Board of Education. And really, there's two stages or two phases that will include our involvement. The first phase is the pre-construction phase, where we'll be working, not designing, but working alongside of LAN and the Board of Education. We'll have a schedule that will define the timelines where we have to hit the dates for design development when the documents are perhaps 60 to 70% complete, and then final construction documents that trigger the agency reviews that the district will have to get. And those agency reviews include the Department of Education, and then whether it be the Department of Community Affairs that reviews the code requirements of the project, of the design. The board may consider going for a local review instead of going down to Trenton for DCA, but that'll be a decision that happens down the road. So this schedule will track all that timeline leading up to going out for bid and then award of contracts. Now, one thing I didn't touch on is the aspect of our involvement, and that is to keep the project within the budget. So we'll be tasked to estimate the project as it goes through the different stages of design, make sure that we're on track. Remember, we have a referendum amount that's fixed. We can't go over that. There's no more money to go, available. So that has to be maintained along the way. So that schedule that I talk about will also include a schedule that will track us through construction. Now, when we do get to construction, EPIC's role on the project will have a presence on site as the contract work is happening, as the contractor's work is occurring. Staff will report to the board. There'll be regular reports, weekly reports, monthly reports. There'll be times where we may be asked to present to the board to update what's going on for the board and the public. Really, I guess that role during construction is to make sure that the contractors are building the project to the specifications and design that the architect has designed to. That's key. Contractors have they're low bidders. So some contractors, not all, are they're crafty in that they're looking to try and make as much against that low bid as possible, and it's really our task to make sure that the contractors build as specified to the architect's design. And again, as budget becomes a theme throughout, not only in pre-construction but during construction, we're maintaining, make sure that the project remains on budget even during construction.
Okay, thanks, Bill. One thing I just wanted to add before I turn it over to the other panelists to see if they have any other comments. I did talk about replacing rooftop HVAC equipment, but I didn't talk about providing air conditioning, which is very important. One of the proposals, part of question 2, would be to provide air conditioning where it does not currently exist in all 3 of the buildings. So that's generally the classroom spaces that currently, in many cases, do not have air conditioning. Air conditioning and the rooftop units I was showing you right now consists of the bigger spaces, the gymnasium, the cafeteria at Holdrum, the media center, the main office, those type of spaces. So with that, I'd like to ask any of the panelists if they had any comments before we turn it over to questions. Okay. Kelly, we'll open it up to questions. Is there any questions that have come in?
Yes, actually, one of the questions that had been asked is, what is the timeline for getting the projects done?
Well, from a design standpoint, we're kind of late in the game with an April referendum in order to get work done this summer. So there's a number of steps that have to be accomplished before we can even have the contractor start any kind of work. And first of all, that includes design. So we have to design the project. Then we have to go out to bid, public bid, have the project awarded. Then we have a contractor on board to get started. So in this first year, we would look to have possibly some of the smaller capital improvement projects, maybe masonry renovations, maybe replacement of some rooftop equipment, maybe some pipe installation, those type of things could theoretically be accomplished this year. We would be hard pressed to get any of that started this summer, but we would start immediately with design when the referendum passes to try to get some of these projects moving this year. And then moving forward, obviously, once the referendum is passed, we would start design on those larger scale projects, the building additions, the connecting corridor, wellness center at Holdrum. That's going to have a long design span just because of the size of it, the project. We would probably look to start that project sometime in the spring of 2022. And then simultaneously with design, we would be designing HVAC improvements, roofing, et cetera. And the overall time frame would be over a 3-year span and would conclude, we're estimating right now, at the end of 2024.
Thank you. I have a question from Rachel Martin. If you wouldn't mind putting your address in the chat, that'd be helpful, but I'm going to bring you forward to ask your question. Thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't able to unmute. My address is 94 Alexander Court.
Thank you.
So my question was for Land Associates, as far as your experience working with other school districts, if you can just provide just a brief experience as far as what other school districts you worked with and with this type of project.
Okay. Well, we've been around since 1965. We have over 90 employees, and we work with approximately 25 to 30 school districts as architect of record currently. We're doing a very similar referendum that was passed in 2018 for the Florham Park Board of Education. It was a $25 million referendum. Very similar projects to yours. HVAC upgrades, air conditioning in the schools, roofing replacement, classroom upgrades, including ceiling and lighting. very, very similar. Year one construction was completed last year. Year two construction is currently underway and then will continue into the summer. And that's over 3 years. The third year, we will finish up the projects next summer. We recently completed a referendum in Fairlawn for $25 million. That was a little bit different. That was 2 building additions to middle schools in Fairlawn. We actually worked with Epic Management. They were the construction managers on that project. That was completed this past September. We're currently working, we're doing a brand new school in Woodbridge. I'm sorry, I drew a blank there for a second. That's nearing completion, and we did major upgrades to their middle school with a large building addition and significant HVAC upgrades, including air conditioning at that school. We've probably worked on 25 to 30 referendums over the last 15 to 20 years for various school districts in New Jersey.
Thank you for that. Can I ask one follow-up question? Just as far as the MEP part of it with the HVAC system, is that something you plan to design in-house? Do you have the experts for that, or are you sub-consulting that to another group?
We're a multi-discipline firm. We have MEP, mechanical, electrical, plumbing in-house. We've done many of these types of projects, full school HVAC upgrades with our in-house staff, so we plan to use our in-house staff for that work.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Kelly, we probably have time for one more during this segment.
Okay, I have a question from Mr. Mark Stern, 791 Matner Court.
Hello, I wanted to ask about the canopy. Wow, the canopies at the elementary schools are rounded off, but the one in Holdrum is more square. I think we should have a consistent appearance among all 3 schools.
I can jump in on this. Thanks for your question, Mr. Stern. And that is an obvious distinction between the schools. You'll see the 2 curved arches at Roberge and Woodside. And the reason we proposed a more square rectilinear design at Holdrum is that that building's a little newer and actually has a more modern aesthetic to it with the flat roofs and the large curtain wall square windows. And the aesthetic, it just has a different look and feel. So to put a curved arched canopy on that building didn't work as well as it did on the other 2 schools. And this building with the long, straight, flat roofs and square window geometry, it really lended itself to a more square canopy design. So to tie them together, we did try to use the same materials, the metals and the green colors.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you very much. Dr. Alvarez?
Yeah, thank you. We're going to move on to the next segment. And thank you all for this overview. And anybody with additional questions, we're going to have an opportunity at the end to come back to this. But I want to take a minute before we move on to talk about how the questions are going to appear on the ballot. So the bond proposal is structured into 3 ballot questions. Question 1 is about the building improvements. Question 2 addresses air conditioning. And question 3 would add wellness areas to our elementary schools. So you've heard all this now, but here's how it works. So question 1 has to be approved for the district to be able to proceed with question 2 or 3. Question 2 or 3 could pass independently of one another. When you hear us talk about the tax impact as an additional $148 per year for the owner of the average assessed home. That is based on all three questions passing. The district has planned for a 25-year payoff of the bonds. We are following a schedule of topics this evening, as you're aware, which will help us cover various aspects of the referendum. Again, remember to type in your name and address in the chat if you want to ask a question during a given segment. You also have the option to email your questions. And we're now going to welcome staff members to talk more about the buildings where they spend their days interacting with our students. And we're going to begin with our Buildings and Grounds Director. I see him somewhere on here, Mr. Ken Peterson.
Good evening, all. It's a pleasure. I have been with Rivervale for 20 years. So I finished up the last referendum along with Epic. The buildings, in my opinion, we've maintained the heck out of them compared to what I inherited 20 plus years ago. There's just some things as a director, the dollars are way too big and your budget doesn't accomplish. Very similar to a homeowner. You go out for a home equity loan or whatever the case might be. But yeah, I mean, when it gets down to like roofing, HVAC equipment, they all have lifespans. So, that's kind of where we're at is, we've done our 20 years and by the time the project gets off the ground and moving, you're going to probably be looking at 22, 24 years by the time you're finished. So, these items are not going to stay in there. Like I say, we have maintained the heck out of it. It's like air conditioning, for example. It's one of the few industries, I'm going to call it, that, there's no air conditioning. I mean, everybody else goes to work, generally speaking, and has air conditioning, if they're in an office or a hospital or a building of some sort. I think it's a critical need. I thought it was a critical need 20 years ago, but, the taxpayers have to vote and they have that right. So, I agree with it. But I'm sure the teachers have a little bit more input on temperatures, being that they're living it daily. So, Mr. Fensick?
Right. So the building itself, once it gets really warm outside, we as a staff notice that it really holds the heat and it doesn't really air out very well. It holds that humidity. And when you're starting a day off in a classroom where the temperature is hovering around 80 degrees or above, depending on what side of the building you're on, and it only increases, the students really lack that motivation to really get going in the morning or even in the afternoon. The real big thing, though, especially in recent years, has to do with allergies and asthma. There are some classroom fans in the classrooms, but what they really do, along with opening windows, is really just circulate allergen-filled air, and it really doesn't provide much relief. And so the air conditioning will, in fact, give some, more conducive learning environment to our students, those who suffer from allergies, those who, may have trouble breathing and things like that. I know that air conditioning, like Mr. Peterson has said, has been on the referendum before. I've been in district for over 20 years. And it's just something that I think in this day and age needs to be seriously considered for our students, to be able to be motivated and to be able to work in a very conducive environment.
Okay, and do we have Mr. Murley?
Yeah, I'm here. I think what Mr. Fensick said is what we pretty much see in the elementary schools, where you can walk in early and you feel it on those days where it's 80 plus degrees outside. And I know it's really September, October, and the end of the year, but what we're asking these kids to do, especially K-5, from what I see, it's uncomfortable for them. It gets hot fast. It is a distraction. We're lucky enough to, as one of the architects mentioned, we do have areas of the building that are cooled. So, we pre-COVID times, we had, scheduled periods to jump into these colder, more conducive environments, but that means kind of uprooting the classroom and taking kids out of the setting and moving rooms across the day. And it becomes a distraction. And, it would be a big help to what we're trying to do to limit that distraction and kind of keep kids in the classroom all day.
Thank you. I see that we have a question. Mrs. Cheryl Berkowitz, if you just bear with me, please.
Am I there? Yep. I just wanted to confirm about the AC. Sorry, I'm so dark. The sun was going down. I just wanted to confirm about the AC, that they have the high-end filters which will filter out the allergens and pollens. It's not just, it'll actually help with the allergies. It's not just going to filter, it just be regular air conditioning, correct?
I think Mr. Sikora.
I'm just sorry. I was
Mute.
making sure I wasn't muted. I apologize. Yeah, so the rooftop equipment, we would definitely have there. I don't know how familiar you are with the filtering systems, but they're rated by MERV. MERV 8 is something that's in a unit ventilator, but recent CDC COVID recommendations is to have higher MERV. Unit ventilators generally can't accept higher MERV, which filters out more particulate. But rooftop equipment can go to higher MERV, MERV 13 and higher. So we would definitely look to increase the filtration on those units. With regards to classroom unit ventilators, the school district already has in needlepoint bipolar ionization. So that addresses some of these air particulate, including the COVID virus. That was recently installed. We are going to look, when the referendum passes, to take that, remove that from the current equipment and put that into the new equipment, so it wouldn't be wasted money. We'll reuse that and put that in combination with the new equipment.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. I'll take this opportunity to remind anyone who is interested in asking a question to please type their name in the chat and their address. We do have a question. Why not just install window units?
Okay, I can handle that one. The issue with window units is they're generally set up for a residential application, number one. Number two, they just recirculate the air in the space, so they don't bring in any outside fresh air, mechanical ventilation, and so you don't really comply with the mechanical code when you're just running a window AC unit. The AC units we're talking about as part of the referendum would be both in the classrooms and in the general areas of the building, is to a system that takes the air in the space, mixes it with fresh outdoor air, and then introduces it back into the space at a lower temperature in the case of cooling or air conditioning. So when we're doing that, we're bringing in fresh ventilation air. And in this time of COVID, that's very important. But we're also filtering the air. So if anyone has those window air conditioning units in their house, they know how thin the filter is in that unit. It doesn't do very much, and you have to constantly clean it. So the mechanical equipment we're proposing has filtration system, and I just talked about, higher MERV filters on the rooftop equipment. Much better job at filtering the air than a window AC would ever do.
Thank you. I see from Louis Aristinato. I apologize for mispronouncing your name, perhaps. If you give me a second, please.
Hi. I was just wanting to know if this estimate has been, reviewed or adjusted for new conditions that the pandemic has created. And in general, do the contracts for these type of projects contain any incentives or penalties to keep the projects on track and on budget?
First of all, I don't know too much of an impact that COVID's had on the referendum projects. The equipment, I just mentioned, the needlepoint bipolar ionization equipment that was installed, we look to reuse. There would be a small cost to remove that equipment from the existing HVAC equipment and put it in the new. But we do have contingencies built into the referendum for fluctuations in the marketplace, for COVID things, for whatever potentially could come up. So there are some cushions there. We do have some contingencies in our budget. As far as contracts and incentives and penalties, there's no incentives for the contractor. We have to publicly bid the work, but there are penalties. They're called liquidated damages. And the bid package, the document that goes out to contractors when they bid, has a clause, a liquidated damages clause that's known up front. There's an established substantial and final completion date noted in this booklet that the contractors must complete by this time. If they go beyond that time and the work is not completed, then there's what they call liquidated damages, and generally that's a penalty of a certain amount of dollars per day until the work is at a point where it's considered complete.
Thank you.
Thank you. We have another question, which is, if the air conditioning is so important, why is it a separate question? Maybe President Waldes?
When we went for our last referendum 20 years ago, it was a second question and had an impact on the passing of the referendum. The referendum did not pass with the air conditioning in it. And we felt that we wanted to offer the community at large the same benefit in order to vote on different parts of the referendum, with the bulk of it being the part or the parts that are absolutely essential. We can't have schools without roofs and proper lighting and flooring. So that was one of the reasons. And so we structured it that not that what was most important, but what needed to be done. I think it's important to point out that we're putting in $6 million of our own capital reserve, and also talking importantly about the time being so right because of the money that we're getting from the state, the state aid that we're getting, the debt relief. If we put it in the main part of the budget, we couldn't find anything that was $9 million that we could take out to put in of the very essential work. So that is a second reason why it was structured this way. It is very important, and we hope that all three questions will pass, but we felt that we would give the voters the opportunity to voice their opinion by their vote.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions in this topic?
I think we can move on. So I think most of you would agree that our teachers do an amazing job at teaching our students. And I'm sure you would also agree that with upgraded classrooms and more functional space, not only would their job be enhanced, but the opportunities for our kids would be much greater. And so the bond proposal would address these needs and create flexible instructional spaces for our children. Principals at Roberge and Holdrum joined this segment to talk about improving school spaces. We are now going to hear from, we're going to start with Roberge Principal Steve Wren, who will talk about upgrades at the elementary school.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarez. Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. I'd like to speak for just a minute about the benefits of additional and more efficient storage space in our elementary classrooms. As we move closer to a post-pandemic learning environment, our elementary classrooms will return to more of a hands-on learning environment, and storage for classroom materials and manipulatives will be extremely important. And with more efficient storage, it also helps to free up potential hazards in the classroom that could be problematic during an emergency. Better storage for student items will eliminate the presence of any belongings in aisles, which will ensure clear walkways in all classrooms. Some of our cabinets and storage areas are literally falling apart as they are original components of the two elementary schools. So replacing this furniture will have positive impacts from both a storage and a safety standpoint. Most of our elementary schools don't have sufficient student storage space either, which limits what items can be brought into school and stored in classrooms by students. So when considering general school supplies and then lunches and snacks and coats and art supplies, books and papers and everything else that's necessary for students to have, this limited storage can really cause problems. Many of our classrooms are crowded with boxes and plastic tubs around the room because we don't have adequate storage. With better storage, supplies would be more accessible, and the classroom space would then, as a result, open up more and lead to greater furniture flexibility, which is critical in a 21st century learning environment. And in addition, the proposal also includes new ceilings and floors and LED lighting, which will improve the overall classroom setting. A large goal of improving classroom storage space is to take better advantage of the current space in these rooms that is currently not being efficiently utilized. So our hope is that with the passing of the referendum, both elementary schools will be able to take better advantage of the classroom space in order to benefit all teachers and students. Now I'd like to turn things over to Holdrum Principal Jim Cody to talk about necessary upgrades at the middle school.
And thank you for this opportunity to speak about the proposed school improvements here at Holdrum Middle School. I've had the pleasure of being part of the Holdrum community for the past 25 years, and I've seen our building and really our community grow and make great progress. One of the distinct features here at Holdrum School is that I would probably say our current hallways are cozy. But sometimes that coziness leads to a bottleneck of congestion, especially if you've ever been outside our main office during lunchtime. On a normal day, up to 300 students pass in that hallway, up and down this small staircase, and they're supposed to do that within 3 minutes of passing time. That 3 minutes usually lasts much longer, and many of our parents have experienced this on back-to-school nights, or maybe even as students here at Holdrum Middle School. Currently, our hallways are too narrow to accommodate lockers that are for being placed there, forcing them to be in our classrooms. This limits the flexibility of students to travel to and from these lockers during the day, and especially after their phys ed classes when they need to go and pick up their devices. A new corridor of progress could provide relief in these areas. It would allow for a central location of new lockers that students can use throughout the day. It will also allow for the increase in storage space within the classroom and really to give the teachers additional tools that they know what to do with in their classrooms. It also would allow for greater efficiency in student travels to get from one side of the building to the other. This corridor of progress also allows for the creation of 2 enclosed secure courtyards that would increase flexible outdoor space for a variety of activities, for classes, for clubs, for maybe morning yoga with our wellness classes and clubs that we have there. It would also provide some additional classroom space that we always could use here at Holdrum Middle School. Really, the experts are also along here with me. I'm going to introduce Mr. Jasper, Mr. Sarnowski, Ms. Reiser, and Mr. Yaremko to expand upon these. Mr. Jasper.
Thank you, Mr. Cody. Real quickly, I just want to add that the addition of these new corridors will improve student safety tremendously. While walking in the hallways, there's a lot of congestion, the bottlenecking that Mr. Cody talked about. We sometimes have large groups traveling in the hallways. This could be at dismissal, after an assembly, at arrival, after lunch, and coming up that small staircase, it's just an issue. There have been times in the past where the bottleneck has caused safety concerns. And, you know, the adding this new corridor and adding this new space will really kind of help alleviate some of those concerns. You know, just adding more space really just makes a safer school environment. And that's something that I think is really important here. So I just want to now introduce Mr. Sarnowski so he can add his expertise as well.
Thank you, Mr. Jasper. So like many teachers at Holdrum, I teach multiple grade levels throughout the course of the day. So when it's time for students to come into the classroom to access their lockers, be it on their way to gym to put their devices away or to grab their lunch, there can be some challenges that you face. So for example, when my 7th grade students come in to stow away those laptops, I often have an 8th grade class that's supposed to be beginning at that same exact time in that room. So obviously the noise of the students, the lockers slamming, the fact that the lockers are quite narrow and congested means not all of the students can access their lockers at the same time. So this can be a rather drawn out process. And while that's going on, I'm losing instructional time with that 8th grade group. As you can imagine, it's a pretty distracting scene. So we do lose instructional time with this. And the other area is actually student safety and monitoring. So obviously it's very important at Holdrum, and as teachers we're assigned to various locations around the building in the morning and in the afternoon to monitor students. And this could actually cause some issues. So for example, if you have lunch duty and you are outside with students, if I'm one of the 2 teachers that are out there, you have to stay outside, allow the students to enter the building, and you yourself are usually amongst the last to come in. You want to make sure everybody's in the building heading to their classes, and you need to make sure that the doors behind you are locked and secure. While you're doing this, for my case, my group of kids are asked to wait outside the classroom in that congested hallway already so that they're not unattended in the room. Then when I arrive, they can enter, go to their lockers, and then the next group of kids are also going to be delayed. Same thing can happen at the end of the day as well. If you have bus duty, for example, as I dismiss my last class, I may have 20 to 25 students with their lockers. I'm supposed to be there, but at the same time, I need to make sure I get to my post for bus duty to make sure everybody's fine there. Often you have to rely on a colleague to step in and look. Whereas if these were in a more centralized location, like a hallway, maybe 1 or 2 teachers could monitor most of the 7th graders at their lockers versus something like 7 or 6, which could really free us up and can really help us monitor students better. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to my colleague, Ms. Reiser.
Thank you, Mr. Sarnowski. So I am also on the other end of the building, and I teach multiple grade levels. So my classroom is at the end of the 8th grade wing, which is the furthest classroom away from the gymnasium. So I just wanted to add a little bit about the efficiency of student movement between classes. So a lot of the time students are late. Any of my ex-students will tell you they'll never forget me standing at my classroom door tapping on my watch. But having less congestion in the hallways will allow them to get to class on time, which, I mean, most obviously increases student focus and concentration, because if they're there on time and they can get themselves settled, they're already off to a better start and better equipped to get the most out of the learning experience. On top of the fact that it takes away time from instruction when we're waiting for students to arrive from gym or from lunch. And it also allows me to kind of piggyback off of what Mr. Sarnowski said, to get to my students after covering a lunch duty or a study zone or any other obligations in 3 minutes or less, as opposed to the reality of the 5 to 6 minutes that it usually takes. And just that with the easier movement from classroom to classroom, the kids are less stressed. They won't have to be stressed about missing that due now or missing an important announcement or getting started along with the rest of the class. So I just think that having the extra corridor, the corridor of progress, will just make things less stressful for kids and allow them to make the best out of their experiences in the classroom. And I'll just pass it over to Mr. Yaremko, who's going to talk about the outdoor courtyards.
Thank you, Ms. Reiser. So happy to be here tonight. Today was one of those days that just reminded me of why it's so important to get outside. The sunshine, the warmer temperature is just so invigorating. I took my period 1 class outside. We had a yoga practice on the blacktop, which is actually behind that blue edition that you see on the screen in front of you right now. And then throughout the day, I took go and fill my water bottle up, and I see other teachers that were having their classes basically do the same thing. I was having students practice yoga. Many other teachers were literally just having students sit on the blacktop with their laptop. And while the fresh sunshine, fresh air and sunshine no doubt invigorated, kind of counteracting what Mr. Fensick mentioned earlier with that warm temperatures that can kind of like really impede learning and decrease motivation. Having students sit on the ground in an area that's not really designed for learning, oh, it might be nice to get outside, is not really the most efficient scenario for us as educators. On top of that, that area behind the school is essentially totally open to the public. So having an enclosed courtyard space that's specifically designed for learning, no doubt will enhance student comfort and will add a whole deal of security for us. As Mr. Cody mentioned, I can foresee that myself, I'm one of the teachers that runs the Yoga and Meditation Wellness Club. Our science club and classes will be designing activities that can be used in these outdoor spaces, as well as classes, say, like language arts. Simply just go outside and use that space for what they would normally do, like read in their classroom. I think should something like this get through, they're going to be very popular and spaces that students are going to love and teachers are going to, let's not say fight, but certainly there'll be a little bit of talk about who's going to be using them on a daily basis. I'd like to send our presentation back to Dr. Alvarez. Thank you.
Great. And any questions? Kelly, do we have anything in the line there?
Yes, we do. Why is storage such an issue, and students don't do everything on the computer? Or they actually, I'm sorry, they do everything on the computer, so why would they need additional storage? Mr. Cody?
Sure. I would say that computers, especially this year, have really been a big part of education, and thanks to even the work that our Ed Fund has done with that to provide that technology. But learning is still hands-on, and having that place to put, even in some of the slides you saw above the lockers, those mobiles. I remember as a social studies teacher building a Holdrum making Holdrum School a castle, and having those castles up on the lockers that kids put together. So the books, the paper, the art supplies, they're still there. And in some of those places, because we have lockers, we don't have that storage. So that storage would be certainly something that would be make our supplies more accessible. It really opens up the classroom in the slides you saw. It allows them for greater collaboration amongst group. And it also just showed you just the aesthetics of the classroom. If you're in a great place to learn, around the surroundings, I think that's going to have a huge impact on our students. and that LED lighting, the floors, the ceiling. I think that that's just going to not only motivate our students, but our staff as well.
That's great. Thank you. I have another question. So why make courtyards if students have to spend most of their time in classrooms anyway?
I guess I'll grab that one. Really, I think Mr. Yaremko said it best. It's really our outdoor space, even this year, is really an extension of our classroom. It's not just, for some place right now, it's just to go out and, maybe grab a break, but having that security, having that privacy, allowing, when we have morning yoga at 7:40 in the morning, to have that in a secure sunrise yoga. I mean, I know it's not on a beach of Hawaii, but it does sound wonderful. And it's a secure, private place. It allows for science. Maybe it's a butterfly, tree or something along those lines, where these experiments can be living and be part of our classroom experience for our students. And some students maybe can utilize these courtyards at other times. Maybe during a lunch period, maybe we have a group of kids that, okay, they don't want to be out in the backfield. Maybe they don't want to be shooting hoops or wherever, but they want to have a place to read, and maybe trying to allow that opportunity, not just in our media center, but out on a nice day, could be utilized for that as well. So I think the courtyards really just give a secure place for this to occur.
And if I can just jump in regarding Roberge and our current courtyard setup, I think what Mr. Yaremko mentioned earlier reminded me, as he was talking about, utilizing the blacktop, which is not really meant for students to really go outside and sit there for any sort of, whether it's a meditation period or for instruction. It reminded me of our current courtyard at Roberge, which we have a nice enclosed courtyard. We have the space there, but based on just the heat and just the way that it's set up, we're not able to utilize it. So we have some tables out there that, pre-pandemic were sparingly used by some of our classes. But why not take advantage of an opportunity to take that space and transform it into, a wellness courtyard space where we can grow things, and we can have spaces for students to go, whether it's for a yoga club or with a teacher as part of a class. I think that's a big focus, at least at Roberge, is to really take advantage of that space, which has not been in years. So that's just something I wanted to add.
Thank you.
We're good? Yep. Thank you all. This has really been very, very helpful. And I think for those of us that are listening in, you can see that the proposed projects would improve the day-to-day experience for all students. Now we're going to hear from teachers and counselors about strategies to address student wellness. This is an area that, of course, we were focused on prior to the pandemic, and the needs have only escalated in the last year. So I'm going to turn this over to our supervisor of our child study team, Joelle DiGaetano. Joelle, are you there?
Oh.
There you go. We can hear you.
Oh dear. I'm sorry. We've been doing this for so long and I still don't get it. So I apologize. So I'm going to start over. So as many of you know, this topic is very near and dear to me. I've been working with a lot of our staff on developing some of our yoga programs and mindfulness programs. So I'm very excited to be here tonight to talk about our wellness centers. We interviewed our teachers as part of a focus group back in, I believe it was 2019. And overwhelmingly, the teachers identified student stress and anxiety as an area of concern and an area where they wanted more support. So I think that things with the pandemic, as we know, our students' mental health has just become even more critical with the pandemic. So I think the timing for this is really, really kind of a perfect storm, if you will. So I think having the wellness centers in the buildings, it's going to allow us to grow our programs, because I do think we do have some really nice programs that can be expanded on. Our yoga program, our mindfulness programs, our mental health support that we provide to our students. Having the space to do this will allow us to provide, students have a safe place to go. I think somebody mentioned at lunchtime, it's a really difficult time for many of our students that have social anxiety to be in the lunchroom or out on the playground. So this could be a safe place for them to grab a book or talk with a friend or a staff member. It'll allow them to go someplace where when they're overwhelmed and need to decompress. It will give us a place to, I feel like the options are endless, really. We could do community service projects, run our yoga groups without having to, fight for space. We could have counseling groups, again, in a safe place, indoors or outdoors. We could, group counseling, community service and clubs, and elective courses too. I think Mr. Cody mentioned running some of our elective courses, like our mindful music class at the middle school could be set up in these wellness centers. So I really think that the possibilities for our students to learn and grow and connect with each other are endless. So I'm really excited about this phase. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over if any of our panelists want to talk a little bit about how they're feeling about the wellness centers.
Yeah, thanks, Joelle. I think that having a space dedicated to student wellness really demonstrates our commitment to their mental well-being. As several of you have pointed out, we've been talking about this far long prior to the pandemic, and of course it's only going to get more important. We really want our students to view their mental health as just as important as their physical health. We know our students recognize that they have physical education and gym to really improve their physical selves, and we want them to view their wellness center as a place where they're comfortable to go working on their mental health as well.
I also wanted to mention a few things from the elementary perspective. One of the things, Joelle, that you had mentioned was space. And we make it work, sharing the gym and sharing the music room. But I think having an additional space where we could have the yoga program. I've actually noticed this year when I'm doing yoga virtually, some of the kids are taking their mats outside. They're on the deck outside their house, or they're on a porch doing their yoga. So they're actually choosing that their outdoors is a spot that they like to do yoga, which I thought is really interesting now that we have these spaces planned. And then the second thing is just that we know the programs provide so much benefits to the students. Just having that extra space where they can go and be outside. The benefits of yoga are immense for memory, self-esteem, behavior, even academic achievement, and then reducing anxiety and stress. And our little ones really need those movement breaks. They need to sometimes leave the room, reset, and come back, and just having that space to go, I think, is a great benefit for them.
Good evening, everybody. It's Melissa Signori, principal at Woodside School. For those of you who don't know me, I wanted to take an opportunity to talk a little bit more about the outdoor spacing that we've been hearing throughout tonight. And one of the things that we started at Woodside School a couple of years ago, we have a teacher, Mr. Eric Mitchell, who's actually with us tonight. He had a passion for starting an outdoor learning space for the students at Woodside, and he wanted to get a garden going. And at first, we really thought of this garden and this outdoor space as a way for the kids to get out of the textbook and really start to apply and create and get to some of those higher order skills that are really important for kids to learn. And so we focused on how do we integrate science and kids make predictions and experiments through the garden. How do they learn about the politics of food, the access of foods throughout the country and the world in social studies? how do you plot and figure dimensions out in math and really kind of bring their learning to life. But then what we realized is when the garden was in the process of being built, is it was so much more than that, that it became the hub of Woodside School, and every single grade got involved, and the pride that came from the students and even the parents, those parents that might be on tonight that are Woodside parents, got involved and would come and help take care of our garden. And then it began to expand where we reached out to the food pantry and was able to provide fresh produce. That then branched out into compassionate citizenship and what does that look like? And I just wanted to kind of share that experience because we heard tonight throughout this whole event how at all three schools, how that's going to be really important to kind of build those outdoor learning spaces and be able to replicate those experiences for the students throughout our whole district. So I just wanted, like I said, take the opportunity to share a little bit about that and what some of those outdoor spaces might be able to look like and take advantage of. Thanks.
Hi, good evening. How are you? I am a fifth grade teacher at Woodside, and I'm very involved in the garden project, you could say. It's something that it was a passion of mine that, the administration allowed me to kind of develop. And I think part of the reason is because it grew from this tiny little seed, no pun intended, into this, this big thing. And it started as a couple little boxes, and then through different grants, through the BCUA, the Rivervale Education Foundation, the Ed Fund, and box tops, things like that, we were able to build a really great community garden. That was my vision, our vision at the school. And my fifth grade class, we kind of go out there and take care of it. And what these kids have learned, first and foremost, is that it's a lot of hard work to run a garden. So that was something that they learned about themselves, and kids that I would have never thought would put on gloves and, want to break a sweat. They were in there jumping in, and they loved it. They invested themselves into this project. Going along with, the middle school talking and Mr. Wren talking about the courtyard at Roberge. We literally, when spring comes, we go outside and we can spend the entire day outside from the minute that we get there to the minute we leave, do all of our subjects, and use the garden as a main tool in that. Geometry, when we learn about social studies and the Native Americans, we grow corn, beans, and squash. And then when we harvest it, we're giving it to the food pantry pre-pandemic and, doing all sorts of things. That was great for the community, and the kids were seeing the benefits of helping out people in need in their own community. And that was good for their mental well-being. And it was good for, it's good for everybody. So, these are great spaces that would be utilized by both the kids and the staff, and a happy place, makes the learning a lot better.
To piggyback what everybody has said, we've used the Wellness Center at the high school for about 6 years now, and it's been so beneficial to students, the staff, in exactly all the settings that everyone has mentioned. The unit lunch with 1,200 kids at the high school, it's a place for certain kids that might have certain anxiety about that setting to go and feel comfortable. And it's not as big of a space as what they're setting up here at the middle school and the elementary schools, as far as a separate classroom type, area for the different classes to go to. But we've seen such success and major benefits to the high school students with the Wellness Center. Having a place that they can go when they're feeling stressed, when they're feeling anxious, having a person to talk to. And I mean, it's been important for 5 or 6 years, and there's no more importance than coming off of this pandemic and the issues that, elementary, middle, high school students are having to utilize a wellness center throughout their day and throughout their learning process. And then to what Mr. Mitchell spoke about, I mean, bringing a class outside, even if it's for the whole day, for 20 minutes, for a yoga session, such beneficial points to every student's learning. And I think these are huge areas of need in elementary and middle school leading up to high school and college years.
Thank you, Tom. I actually had the privilege of doing some of my training at Pascack Valley Wellness Center before I came to Rivervale, and I think it is just wonderful to think about providing the opportunity for our younger students to be able to see how important it is to think about their, mental health as well as their physical health from a very young age, and how school is making that important right from the beginning of their education as they move forward, so that they develop those skills in a, age appropriate way when they're younger, and then be able to utilize even the wellness center at the high school in a healthy and productive way as well. So I feel it just works in tandem very well with the system.
We have a question that was posed. How does a wellness center reduce stigma surrounding mental health? Ms. Kasbar?
So to kind of piggyback a little bit what I just said, as far as, making it actually a physically part of the structure of the school gives it, a lot of credibility, and also gives it a certain level of importance, right? Our gym stands out as an important room in the building. So if wellness stands beside it, it also shows that there is something to addressing our mental health, that there's credibility and an importance to that. And then also to be able to be an opportunity that kids that may feel more comfortable doing yoga and things, and teachers that allow them to explore that, someone who may not necessarily look to talk to someone or need to talk to someone is going to get chances to be able to address their mental health in a way that they do with their school community.
We have another question I'll ask to the group. Schools already have counselors. Why is it necessary to put more resources into mental health? Mrs. DiGaetano?
Sure. So we do have counselors, and we have an excellent team of counselors that work very closely together to meet our student needs. Unfortunately, our student needs have become a lot more clinical in nature. And so we have found that we've needed to reach out to experts, whether it's psychiatrists or emergency rooms in some cases. And so I do feel very blessed that this year we've brought on a clinician from West Bergen Mental Health Care who's been amazing at keeping our kids in school. So when we have kids that are at risk or are expressing some serious concerns, we'd much rather be able to assess them in school with people they're familiar with and determine what the best treatment plan is for them, rather than send them out to, like I said, to emergency rooms, which can be very scary places. So as much as our school team is gifted, again, I feel very blessed to work with them. Most of them are not clinically trained. And so our kids' needs are much more clinical in nature now. And so we need to work together with those more clinical people and the school people together to meet the needs of the students. And again, to keep them in school, in our buildings, not send them out, and also not have to send them to other programs. I feel like if we're more proactive with our kids with mental health issues, we'll be able to keep them in district much more often.
Can I just add one more thing too, to piggyback off of Joelle? I think a lot of times we have a very wide spectrum of needs, from maybe a kid who just needs a break from the room for a minute, just to go talk with the teacher, or is having a conflict with a friend. And maybe that's just a space where a teacher could sit, or an aide could sit with two students and resolve that conflict. So I think we have, the support staff, and we have those mental health counselors, and we have guidance counselors, but sometimes kids just need a minute. And that can also be a place for that kind of lower end of the spectrum of the mental health too.
Good.
I'd like to remind the participants that if you would like to ask a question, please type your name and address in the chat. I have Lewis.
Will these wellness centers require additional staff, either new specialists to be brought on, or is the current staff at the schools, I guess, going to be the ones that run these centers for any particular type of programs?
I'll grab that one. That's a great question. And I'm happy to say we will not need to hire any additional staff. We will be able to staff the wellness centers with our guidance counselors, our West Bergen therapists, and our child study team members.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. How would you prevent the wellness center from being misused as an escape from academic demands?
I can address that. That's a great question. And that's a question that always comes up, even when students come to the counseling office. So as counselors, we have seen that before. We do see task avoidant behaviors. And of course, with the wellness center, as with anything else, we want to support our students while at the same time making sure that they meet their academic responsibilities. So if students are showing task avoidant behaviors and coming to the wellness center to avoid certain things, we would address that with appropriate strategies to help them promote stronger resiliency skills, figure out what they're avoiding, and figuring out how to address that for them.
Thank you. Does anybody else have any questions or comments? Dr. Alvarez?
Yep. So we thank our panelists for this important discussion on wellness. It's an area of great need for our students. And we are about to wrap up this forum, but we need to hear about key financial details of the proposal. So our experts will explain the favorable timing and the benefits of the state aid. And I'm going to turn this over to our bond counsel, Andrea Kahn. And I believe Andrea is with us.
I am here, yes.
Hi, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you again for this opportunity. I was privileged to work with the school district 20 years ago when it issued the bonds that are maturing. And again, when they were refunded in 2010. One of the strategies that the district is using is in order to minimize the impact of the bond issue. The district had planned to issue the bonds at this time to take advantage of the final payment of the bonds that were issued 20 years ago and be able to issue the new bonds. So the district is on schedule to do that. And as has been explained earlier, there will be 3 bond proposals. The first one is for the priority building improvements. The second one is for the air conditioning. And the second one will only take effect if the first one is also approved at this election. And the third one is for the wellness centers at the elementary schools. And that one will only take effect if the first bond proposal is also approved, because the first bond proposal involves the highest priority of the building improvements that are essential for the school district to undertake. I do want to explain very briefly that the form of the bond proposals is confusing because we have to contain the language that's included by state law, both in the statute and the regulations. And we're required to identify the eligible costs related to each of the schools and any ineligible costs. The district has been very successful. They started reviewing their projects 2 years ago, as has been explained, and they've received determinations from the state as to the eligible costs. All of the renovations are eligible for funding, and the only non-eligible costs are related to spaces, and that's because of the way the state formula works. It's only based upon unhoused students. So the district has received approvals for the going forward with the referendum. The bond proposals and the work that would be undertaken meets requirements of state code, and there's been a determination of the eligible costs. At this point, what I'd like to do is turn this over to Anthony Inverso of Phoenix Advisors, the financial advisor, and he can explain the tax impact based upon the approval of first question number 1, as well as the approval of the additional 2 questions and how it would impact the taxpayers of this district.
Thank you, Andrea. Everybody can hear me okay? Perfect.
Yes.
Great. So there's a pie chart on the screen. What this shows is the incremental impact on a home assessed at the town's average of $593,000. I want to point out that this is an assessment. This is the assessed value of a home. This is not related to the market value of your home. This is what's on your tax bills as the value of the land and the improvements. You'll see that in your tax bill every year. So this is not what you could sell your house at today. This is what the assessed valuation is. So that's the average in the town. And so all these numbers are based off of that average assessment. So if your home is assessed at a value higher than 593, then these numbers would be slightly different. If your house is assessed at a value lower than 593,000, these numbers would be lower for you. So what this pie chart shows is the incremental impact from the bond financing. As Andrea mentioned, the district has debt that paid off this year. The last payment was in September, which is in the current budget year. The impact of that debt service is about $230 on the average assessed home. So the impact of, for example, question 1 is $34 more than that. If question 1 and 2 are approved, it's an additional impact of $89. And then, as the pie chart shows, if question 1, 2, and 3 are approved, then it's an additional impact of $25 above the first 2 numbers I just mentioned. We've analyzed this project for a 25-year bond financing, and we are using an estimated interest rate of 2.25%. That's a fair estimate in the current market. Many people may have seen the fluctuations in the Treasury market over the last month or so. Certainly, that has impacted some borrowing, but the municipal market, which is the tax-exempt market, which these bonds would be, has not been impacted as the Treasury market has. So we feel that the 2.25% is a good estimate of where the bonds would sell. Certainly, there's some time before we go to the market, and the markets can be volatile. So it's our estimate of where we are now and where we think we'll be, but certainly the markets can change. And just a couple more things. The impact. This is an average annual impact. It's approximately equal each year, but the way the bonds are amortized won't be the same exact amount every single year, but this is on average over that 25-year period what the incremental impact would be from the bond financing. And Andrea mentioned that there was state aid that would be applied. We've estimated that state aid to be about 30%. It's like a 30% discount on if you're buying something. It's like a 30% coupon. So it would be applied every year to the principal and the interest on the bonds. So we've taken all of the projects that are being proposed here and the eligible cost that Andrea mentioned and come up with an estimated value of 30% for that statement.
Thank you. We do have a question that was emailed. Is there a big difference if 2 out of 3 questions pass? Will the dollar amount tax hike be on the ballot? And the number sounds scary, although the actual tax raise is not a lot. Andrew, you could probably speak to the ballot question.
I think that the main question is what is the difference in the cost? And Anthony can address what it would be if in the different scenarios of if question number 1 simply passes, it would be an increase of only $34 over the existing amount. The existing amount that's being paid is $230. The question number 1 includes the appropriation of the capital reserve, which is $6,770,000, and it authorizes $25 million in bonds. If we add to it question number 2 itself only authorizes, it authorizes another $9 million in bonds, but it's not offset by the capital reserve. So that would increase the project by another $89. And question number 3 does not receive aid because it's for the elementary school wellness spaces. Those are spaces, so they were not eligible for the aid, and those are ineligible costs. And that would increase another $25. So that's basically the amount that are the increases for the cost of these 3 bond issues.
And it's the case that it's not these costs that go on the ballot.
That's right. These are costs based upon the estimates currently being made. I think Anthony explained that we're using current interest rates, which we believe if we issued now would be around 2.25% for a 25-year issue bond. And it also does anticipate the debt service aid. The debt service aid is on principal and interest. It's about it's basically about 30% of the cost of the principal and interest due each year over the life of the issue. So you only get debt service aid if you actually issue the bonds. So it's a favorable time to be issuing bonds, both because, number 1, interest rates are still at historic lows, and also because the district has been approved for the debt service aid.
Thank you. I have another question. Schools are supposed to get billions of dollars from the American Rescue Plan. Why not wait for that?
Shall I address that? First, it's not 100% clear exactly which aspects of the projects would be approvable costs for that money. So I'm sure the district will be applying for every amount that it's entitled to, and to the extent that it can get that, it would offset the costs of these projects.
Thank you. And if we paid off the debt in 2020, the question is, wouldn't we be due to pay lower taxes?
Theoretically, the answer to that is yes, except for the fact that the work has to be done. By spreading it out and paying for it over 25 years, you reduce the cost. If you have to raise that money in your annual budgets or through capital reserve and pay it down much more quickly, it would be paid by the current taxpayers. One of the reasons that public bodies issue bonds to finance major capital projects, such as this one, is to be able to spread that cost over the life of the issue, to be paid for by the taxpayers who are benefiting from the use of those facilities. When those facilities reach the end of their useful life, then it's time to assess the needs going forward. And again, generally speaking, for municipal public finance, the policy would be to have the taxpayers who enjoy the benefits of those improvements to be the taxpayers to pay for them.
Yeah, and also timing wise, we talked about interest rates. We don't believe that interest rates are going to be lower than where we are today. We're at a very good spot in the market. I mentioned the 2.25% estimate. It's over 25 years. That's a really low interest rate when you look historically. So if we were to delay things and do this project in the future, I don't think we'd be at this low interest rate level, and that would just push up the tax impact to a higher level.
Just to add to that, just before this meeting, I looked up what we had issued the original bonds at, and it was 4.5% per annum. And we did refund them in 2010, and that brought the interest rate down to a yield of about 2.62%. So you can see that, just on your own historical trend, it's a very favorable time to be entering into the market.
And that financing in 2010 would have been a much shorter financing because it was only on the balance of that particular bond. So 2.6% is a good rate, but certainly that was only for a 10-year period. This is 2.25% for 25 years.
Yes, thank you.
I'd just like to add on.
Go ahead.
Andrea had mentioned the alternative if the board didn't go to a referendum would be to try to raise money through capital reserve, which would be a almost unachievable event just because of the cost of the upgrades. But I just wanted to make it clear that going through a referendum, we will receive debt service aid from the state. Going through capital reserve through the regular operating budget, you're not eligible for that service aid. So we would get an essential coupon, if you will, of 30% on the cost of the projects, roughly, going through this referendum route. Whereas if you try to do some of the projects through capital reserve through your regular operating budget, you would not see any of that.
Good point.
Correct. I have a question from Mr. Weber.
Hi, everyone. How's everybody doing tonight?
Good, thank you.
Good. Quick question. So as they were building out the new homes on the golf course, part of the sell story in town was everyone's taxes would be going down. So did the adjusted taxes, I forget, the $100, $150, did that factor in the new homes? So in other words, if those homes weren't being built, would the impact per household be greater if not for those homes subsidizing the base a little bit?
Great question. Those homes have not been factored into this tax rate. So when those assessments come on to the books, it will actually help to spread the tax increase out and therefore decreasing the taxes.
Is there an estimate?
At this time, we do not have a perfect estimate. We have met with the mayor and preliminary estimates were roughly $1,000 per home. But again, that was back in 2018. You could clearly see that the building project is progressing quite quickly. My understanding is that there will be additional assessments that come on the books by the end of this year, but I don't have any specifics on that just yet. Anthony?
Yeah, I was going to add that we did not factor that into our analysis. We were very conservative in assuming that the assessed valuation that's in the town currently is what will be there in the next 25 years. So any growth, any new projects, any new development, as was just referred to, would certainly increase your assessed value, which would reduce the impact on individual homeowners. But to be conservative and to because you can't predict some of these things sometimes. You can't predict, you know, where the market would be and what's coming down the road. So we took the ultimate conservative approach and just assumed a stagnant tax base for the next 25 years.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Dunn, hold on, please. I will bring you in just a second. I'm just going to hold this question for the time being and ask, is there anybody else who has a question regarding finances? Okay, she would like for me to read this. Bryn Dunn, 575 Rivervale Road. I think the AC is important for a number of reasons. Do we know if schools in neighboring towns have AC in terms of how we compare and if we are keeping up? I think that if AC is important to a quality education, we have to be aware of the negative effects it could have not only on our students and educators, but on our home values. Thank you. And that's an accurate statement that if the schools are a very important piece of the community and they're why people move into town. And if the schools are not productive and they're not top notch, you tend to not have as good of home values as you may have. And again, it's why people choose the towns that they select to live in. It's for services and it's for schools.
Billy, if I could add, from our experience, most of our recent referendums have some component of air conditioning included, if not air conditioning of all the schools. Anything we would design new, whether it be an addition or a new school, is automatically going to include air conditioning. We're doing some projects for the School Development Authority, and they have air conditioning included in their projects, both for renovation and new. So we've seen in the last 20 years that air conditioning, as the years have gone on, has been more and more important in school districts' referendums.
And I could add to that, and the many referenda that I've been involved in, it's generally a component, and for the same sorts of reasons, both because you need to educate the kids, it gets warm sooner, it stays warm longer, and of course there's the air quality issues. So many of the districts that we've worked with have been including air conditioning.
To add to the answer and response of, are we keeping up? We are actually in an interesting perspective because most of the other schools, districts surrounding us do not have air conditioning in their large spaces. We have air conditioning currently in our gyms, our media areas, and in the new, from the previous bond referendum, in the newer classrooms. So other school districts may have air conditioning in other parts of their building, but they're struggling with it just as well. And I know that in the past couple of years, there has been a push, and some districts have elected to install the window units. And, you know, again, their life expectancy is not nearly what it would be for a complete centralized type of air conditioning unit and HVAC system. So I think that that has to be taken into account, and those school districts did not receive any state aid on the air conditioning units that they put into place. They may have had donations from their PTAs or their ed funds, but that's money that they will not get back. And that's why we're going forward with the bond referendum to maximize and be as efficient as possible for all of the community. And we have been fiscally responsible. We have, since the last referendum, we have renovated all 3 of our media centers with the help of the PTA and the Ed Fund. We have renovated both elementary school gyms. We have installed electronic basketball nets in each of those gyms. We have renovated all of our science labs at the middle school. We have created a new digital photo lab at the middle school, and we are continuing to maintain our buildings. So these are for items that are above and beyond our regular budget, and we think it's important. The board has carefully calculated all of this and thought through this. So we're very excited for this, and we'd like to spread the word. We have a website that specifies and provides a lot of information that I don't know if it's been on our slides. So I would encourage people to continue to read up on this. I know the administration is available, so you can continue to email us. You can call us. And thank you. Yes, the FAQs and the financial facts are up on the webpage, on the website. Is there anyone else that has any questions, comments? Board?
I would just like to reiterate something that we've been hearing over and over again, but I don't think it can be said enough, that this really is a perfect storm with the low interest rates, with the debt relief that we'll receive from the state, and the fact that we are in a situation where we have to implement these. Kelly, maybe you can tell us how long it took us to save the $6 million. It's important to realize we can't just save large amounts of money. We have a cap that we're allowed to put in every year. We can't. It's taken us a long time to get to $6 million, and that doesn't even cover the new roofs. So we'd be really looking at roofs maybe 10 years from now if we had to save for it out of our own. What we can put away every year. So I think that's important to point out.
I think that's a great point. So I got to the district in 2004, and you had about $150,000 in your cap reserve. So it's taken the better part of 15 years to save this money. And whilst you have done projects with that money, it still takes a long time. And as Mr. Sikora had identified, the roofing aspect of this referendum is $8-point-something million. Is there anyone else that has a question, a comment, or like to make a statement?
I would just also, I think there's a tendency to think that when we talk about the wellness centers, there's a certain frivolous to it, and it's not essential to learning. And I would beg to differ and really want people to realize how important the mental health component is to the well-being of the child, to the educational development of the child, to the overall well-being of the child. So please don't underestimate how important these wellness centers are. When I first got on the board, maybe the high school kids were having emotional problems, and now it's the kindergarten kids. I mean, it's a stressful time. Think of it, parents how stressful it is for you, it's just as stressful for the children. And this was happening even before the pandemic. I always say that I went to a national school board meeting conference, and I thought I would be learning about all the innovative curriculum that was going on across the country. And it wasn't. Mostly it was devoted to wellness, mental health, bullying, and security. And almost the educational component was a smaller portion of the whole 3-day conference than I expected. So it's not only a Riverdale problem or Bergen County or New Jersey, it's a national problem. And we're lucky enough to be innovative and have the staff and the ideas of the administrators and the support of the board to be addressing that in a very proactive way.
Thank you.
Kelly, if there were no further questions from the board or the public, I just want to take this opportunity to thank our panelists for joining us, and I really think you added a lot to the discussion. And I also want to thank our community members who are listening in. I hope you learned something. I hope you have more information. And again, if you have any questions, write to us. We're happy to continue the conversation. I'm also going to remind you, if you think you missed something, this is being recorded. So you could visit rivervaleschools.com/YouTube. There it is on the screen. And you can see any part of tonight's discussion. And just remember to make your voices heard on Tuesday, April 20th, and come out and vote. Thank you all.
Thank you. Madam President, we need a motion to adjourn.
Yes. May I have a motion to adjourn? We are not going into closed session and won't be taking any action.
Okay, I'll move it.
Thank you. And I need a second.
I'll second.
Thank you so much. Thank you all. Good night. Stay safe.
Thank you.